determined to nationalize the industry and put Iranian oil under Iranian control. The British government responded by stepping up its propaganda campaign, ordering the BBC to
destroy Persian confidence in the present policy of the Persian government,
and brands the Mossadegh administration
stupid and obstinate.
And the propaganda campaign went to the very highest levels of British government. A dig around at the Public Record Office has revealed a draft memo from the Foreign Office, dated the 13th of September 1951, designed to reassure Clement Attlee.
Prime Minister, the Eastern Service of the BBC receive daily briefing from the Foreign Office on the Persian situation. They are, in fact, amenable to our guidance, and they do their best to support the Persian policy of His Majesty's government. In doing so, they have had to risk losing in Persia their reputation for independence.
These papers haven't only come as a surprise to me. They were also a big shock to Paul Lashmar, author of the book Britain's Secret Propaganda War.
One of the things I would say about this set of documents that you've shown me is, I found them very, very exciting because they are such a clear demonstration of this symbiotic relationship between government and the BBC. It is stunning. I mean, it is so blatant. The message is clear. You stick to British foreign policy line and what suits the British government, or else. I mean, it confirmed a lot of what we suspected, but I don't think we ever saw anything as quite as clear-cut as what you've now shown me.
So it seems the BBC was being dragged deeper and deeper into the British government's efforts to keep control of Iranian oil. Its role was clear: to use the airwaves to persuade the Iranian people that nationalising the industry would be a big mistake.
Scrapping international agreements, repudiating them, and doing just what they jolly well like.
The company's operations in Iran should continue
resist
under the direction
eviction by force by the Persians.
And I've managed to track down an Iranian who remembers the BBC's broadcasts. Sharot Golistan, who was then in his early 20s, was an avid listener to the corporation's Persian service in the early 1950s.
They only had these analysis programs at the end of every broadcast in which a British major who spoke fluent Persian used to come and explain why nationalization would be disastrous for Iran.
At the time, did many people believe him?
He tried to sound very sympathetic for Iran, and this looked very unbelievable for the majority of the Iranian people, and they used to say that he is shedding crocodile tears for Iran.
BBC staff protested vociferously at being used as the mouthpiece of British foreign policy. A strike and resignations followed, but the war of words only intensified. Mossadegh went eyeball to eyeball with the British and nationalised Iranian oil. The British retaliated with an oil embargo and even drew up plans to invade, but American resistance forced London to back down. Britain then claimed that the escalating crisis was paving the way for a communist takeover of Iran, and the BBC was expected to play its part in bringing the threat into Iranian homes. Indeed, a Foreign Office directive to the BBC promotes
encouraging speculation as to where Russia may strike next.
I've just arrived outside the house of Sir Sam Fall, who's the last surviving diplomat from the days in Tehran when the coup was launched, the only man who will be able to tell us from memory what exactly happened.
Through here, okay.
As the oil crisis deepened, Sir Sam Fall and his boss in the embassy came to the conclusion that the Prime Minister, Mossadegh, must go. A coup was called for, but they couldn't go it alone. To be successful, Britain needed to get the Americans on board. Fall was a member of a delegation dispatched to Washington to convince them. His message was to be, the Russians are coming.
Our position, sitting there in Iran at that time, we'd seen the power of the communists. We'd seen the power of the communist mob in Tehran and elsewhere in the country. And our advice, which was eventually taken by everybody else, was that the communists were too big a danger to risk.
Just how closely linked was at that time the British government and Anglo-Iranian oil?
Too damn close. It was a great and terrible mistake on the part of the British government. The oil company were thinking, following their own interests, but the British government should have been following the interests of Britain. It was a terrible folly.
Opinions are divided over the reality of the Russian threat, but the incoming Eisenhower administration took little convincing and agreed to a coup. Given that Mossadegh had broken off diplomatic relations with Britain, it was up to the Americans to carry out the coup on the ground under the leadership of Kermit Roosevelt. The British provided planning, contacts and BBC airtime.
It was a real coup. The word kudeta really meant something that day.
Some claim that this was a popular uprising. It's certainly true that Mossadegh's popularity waned as the oil crisis wore on and Britain's economic sanctions began to cripple the country. But many are nonetheless sceptical that the revolt had widespread support. The British had got their way, and the Shah, who'd supported the coup, tightened his grip on power. He cared little for democracy or human rights, but that didn't lessen the applause that came from London or the flow of military hardware from Washington. The Shah's secret police inspired fear and loathing in equal measure amongst dissidents and political parties. Only conservative clerics and mullahs like Ayatollah Khomeini were left with any sort of freedom. Dissent was growing, and this came to a head in dramatic fashion in 1979.
This has been the day of the revolution. There seemed almost as much gunfire as the hooting of car horns. In a day-long orgy of violence, the people seized control from the Shah's government and all it stood for. Army barracks were plundered.
We came under very heavy attack from 2 or 3 sides of the compound.
One of the most direct consequences of the coup of 1953 is the seizure of the American embassy on November the 4th, 1979, an act which we are living with to this day. And it's a direct legacy of that fact because, as Khomeini called it at the time, the embassy, American embassy, was a nest of spies. What does it refer to? It refers to basically the coup of 1953.
American government in all over the world, we are opposite. We want this country for ourselves.
I mean, this is the problem. In a long-term sense, it would help to explain why the Iranians have this deep distrust of the West. If we're dividing the world into saints and sinners, the West should not necessarily put itself among the saints.
Britain has never officially admitted its role in the coup, and things don't look about to change. As I drive along on my way to the Iranian embassy in London, I've been looking through this response to my second Freedom of Information request from the Foreign Office. It says, and I quote, "I regret to inform you that the information you requested is being withheld." So I've now gone to the top and requested an interview with the Foreign Secretary Jack Straw. Well, we finally arrived at the Iranian embassy. Here I'm to meet the Iranian ambassador, Dr Syed Mohammed Hussein Adeli. I've got one particular question in mind for him. What does he make of the British government's continuing silence over the events of more than half a century ago?
There is no doubt that if we avoid history, we are not able to predict the future. So if the British government would start disclosing the documents, would start even teaching the people and letting them know about developments in 1953, we would be in a better situation for the roadmap of the region to democracy. If we want to start any genuine democratization of the region, we should first admit to our mistakes and tell everybody that we have taken lessons from our mistakes, and we want to start afresh. Even historical confession is going to be quite helpful.
Are you saying it's possible that
the 1979 revolution may never have happened if it